welcome Barry Farmer to this episode of Define the Narrative podcast.
Mhm. Right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the patience to get this done.
No, thank you for the patience. And, the universe always leads me. I feel like this podcast is turning into kind of my own philosophical, ethereal search to kind of understand all the facets of the family that I've
Mhm.
created and the narrative that really fascinates me. It's not just the nuts and bolts of parenting, but that's important
Mhm.
too. And when I saw the ad, it was the Today Show actually, which
Okay.
you've had other press, but it was the Today
Mhm.
Show article that caught my eye. And then one thing that I think really called my attention is you're from Richmond, Virginia, I'm from Birmingham,
Mhm.
Alabama, you're black, I'm white. It's like Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, but um, but I think we share a lot of commonalities and we're not afraid to talk about the race. And I think it's a nice
Mhm.
juxtaposition to bring in the idea of a male perspective of this. So
Okay.
with that, let's get started. You became a parent at 22. Which is a bigger deal for you? That you're an only parent or that you became a parent at such a young age?
I think it's more of the young age thing. I mean, there's a such thing called teen pregnancy or whatever. But, as a single male parent, to be a single male parent at a young age and to kind of do it on purpose, but not on purpose type of thing. I thought, at the time when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't seem so far fetched when someone's telling you yes, we'll let you do it. But, when you look back on it, it's like, oh, you really did that type of thing. And you're like, man, what were you thinking? Why didn't you go this route? Why didn't you go that route? And at the time, that route was important to me. And it was something that I wanted to do. And I was the type of person that if I made up my mind about something, then that's what's going to happen. And I'm not going to stop until I see it through and see what the outcome is going to be. Now, I didn't see three kids as the outcome. I didn't even see one. So life is crazy. My life has been crazy anyway. So why not be a parent at 22 to children who don't reflect who you are in the mirror, type of thing. So yeah.
Let's just call that out, right? Like you're the father of not only three boys,
Hmm.
but of three white boys.
Yeah.
And you started with foster. And when you talked about the 22, I'll just follow it up with you shared a story with me that after high school, you moved out and you were working
Hmm.
in childcare and then an alternative center. And there was one
Hmm.
day where you saw on the bulletin board two flyers. One of them was come become a trucker, and the other
Hmm.
was come get trained for foster care. And
Yeah.
you chose the foster care. When you mentioned once you get something in your mind, had you already thought about it and that was just the trigger, or did that really start the wheels going and it kind of snowballed to the point that you were in a no return?
I had thought about it in a sense as a teenager. I wrote something down in my journal about adopting a kid, and it was not supposed to happen until around this age. I'm 36 now, so it wasn't supposed to happen so soon. But I didn't understand the process of adoption when I wrote it. I realized I do believe in writing down things that you want to manifest into your life and things like that. So when I wrote that down, it was supposed to be like the traditional go through adoption type of thing. I didn't know if single parents were allowed to adopt or anything like that. So, but I did understand foster care later on because when I was working in the alternative school, I was working with a few foster kids who were in group homes and things like that. So that, I was already licensed at that point, and I was like, well, I'm already working with these type of children. I've been where they are in a sense. So I'm going to keep moving forward with it. I'm going to wait and I'm going to be patient with it. I'm not going to rush, a placement because, I want to see what it's like to parent someone that never works out if you rush things. You just got to be patient with it. It wasn't a snowball thing. It was just a matter of chance per se, being in the right place at the right time, meeting with the right person to help guide me and help me understand the process of how things work and them believing in me type of thing. Believing in a 19, 20-year-old who's looking to be a foster parent, but who was already working with kids, and who was really good at working with kids at that point. I had already been working with kids for like 6 years at that point. Someone who could get kids motivated and get them out and about and things like that. But this time they're coming home with you and you got to feed them and you got to take them to the doctor and you got to make sure they're alive, at the end of each day and things like that. So, it was like doing overtime from what my regular job was. And, it was just by chance. It wasn't really planned that way.
You understand the law of attraction much better than I do. You know, just to call out what you wanted and not really
Hmm.
necessarily call out how it was going to happen, because I knew I wanted
Yes.
to be a parent,
Hmm.
but I really ended up spending a lot of time grappling with how I felt like I had to do it. So we'll talk
Hmm.
about that later. But that's good. So you had it in your mind, and the reason that you knew that you wanted to adopt, or one of the reasons, was you actually grew up in foster care, right?
Hmm.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I grew up in foster care. Kinship care is the term that they use here when you are replaced with either a family friend or a relative who was willing to step forward and take care of you. Those particular cases, they don't really get any like support. They just, open their home and they take on all the responsibility. I had spent a few years with my mother's mother, her name was Annie. She was my caregiver for a while until she developed cancer and she passed away. Then I ended up living with my aunt, who was like my mother today. I still call her all the time. She checks on me and everything. She hasn't heard from me in a few days. But I live with her because I also had four sisters that were with my mother. And they ended up going into foster care. And my aunt, she wanted to get them out. So in order for them to come out, I had to leave, which brought in my grandma Cora that everyone hears about. And I didn't know Cora from anything. She was like a stranger to me. My aunt called her and asked her would she be willing to take me in. And she agreed to do so, and I was very reluctant because I didn't know her, and I was, used to stand with my aunt and things like that. And my aunt, she made me this promise. She was like, "Oh, if you go, I come and get you every weekend." And I really wasn't happy about it. But who was I? I was like 4 years old. What choice really did I have here? And I didn't understand the big deal about getting my sisters where they were or whatever. I did end up going with my grandmother Cora, and my aunt did end up getting my sisters out of foster care. Everything worked out. My aunt did come and get me every weekend for 5 years until I was just out and about with other different people and exploring other things in the neighborhood. Even though I was the only child in the neighborhood, I was just going from neighbor house, neighbor's house to neighbor's house, and my grandmother, she would send me to church with the neighbor next door, and things like that. So I was just getting to know other people, which was great. My grandma was always used to tell me, you need to get out there and mingle, which means go out there and meet people. And she was good at pushing me to do that and sending me with the neighbors to help me get outside the neighborhood, so to speak. So yeah, that's how I ended up in kinship care. And I lived with my grandmother for 17 years. I did spend a year away, but then I came right back. And so yeah, I am grateful for that process because it just opened up a lot of doors to people that I may not have ever met and opportunities that I may not have ever had. And having a community wrapped around me as the only child in the neighborhood, or as some people at the schoolhouse. Oh my God, I said schoolhouse. I'm so country. At the school that understood my situation and they were taking me under their wings and doing extra special things for me. So yeah, kinship care was, it was a blessing, I would say.
It takes a village, right?
Yes, it takes a village. I do believe that, and I did have a great village.
And a shout out to grandmothers, both your grandmother Annie
Hmm.
and Cora.
Mhm.
I know that there's going to be people listening to this podcast that are interested in foster care. And I want to take this opportunity to kind of talk about what that shift was that your aunt had to do. In foster care, you
Mhm.
can have different genders in the same bedroom, right?
No, you cannot have them in the same bedroom. So that, that was the issue. My aunt had girls, but I wasn't completely in foster care. So in order to get the girls out of foster care, there was no problem with them coming with in a room with other girls, but there was a problem with them coming in a room with a boy, and that was me. So it was only a two-bedroom place. And I'm like, well, no, about out then voted me off the island. I gotta go.
You got voted off the island.
Got voted off. I got to go somewhere else to live. And I ended up going there to be the only child in the house and the only child in the neighborhood. I had my own room. Christmases belonged to me and only me. They had to share everything. So it was, I think I got the good end of the deal. But it was, that was the thing about foster care. You can't have two different genders sharing a room, no matter if they're brothers and sisters. So that was the thing that had to shift me into another home after that point.
So that's just something I know that that's the case here in California, and I'm sure that's a pretty
hmm I think
universal.
it's pretty much a universal type of thing where, when it comes to foster care, and not, I don't completely, I get it, but I don't all the way get it. Some if they weren't involved, then both genders probably would be sharing a room type of thing. So you know what I mean?
Right. And who's to say that that's not going to be revisited, knowing that since you and I were growing up, the gender conversation has changed. And
hmm
so, we'll mark this for 2023 and see
hmm
at what point foster care makes an adaptation to that. So it sounds like you went to the light and it worked for you. There was a lot of
Yeah.
and nurture for you.
hmm
Which do you feel like you've been guided more by, or do you feel like it's been an equal? Because Barry, I want to be honest, you really could have a lot of strong feelings about all the things that were supposed to be, right? I know for me,
hmm
I was raised, whether it was my own ideas or something that was taught to me of what my family unit was supposed to be. But you, as you've said, you seem to have kind of rolled with it and embraced what was there. So
hmm
thoughts about nature versus nurture.
Well, even though I was with family, you still feel out of place because you're not in that normal family setting. I mean, your grandmother's house is not a normal family setting unless your parents live there with you. You know what I mean? So I still had those feelings of, oh, where are my parents? Why didn't they come see me? Why didn't they come get me? Why they not here at awards day? Things like that. It was a few times they did show up, and I was like, okay, well, this was cool for the moment, but then I won't see you for a while. So then, hey, what was the point of you coming? You weren't here to help get these grades or help do these things that I accomplished, but you showed up for the reward, which was okay. So, those feelings, and I think it's the typical foster care feeling when you're trying to hold on to good memories of your parents, whatever those may be, because it might have been just a flash in the pan, and now you're romanticizing of how things are going to be when y'all go get together, and how things are going to be when they come and get you, or then they say they're coming to get you and they don't, type of things. I've had a few of those times. Or they change their minds about where they said they were going to take you and now they can't do it, type of thing. Broken promises and things like that. So, I've struggled with those feelings growing up, not as an adult, because I pretty much have been looking after myself for a very long time right now. So, I had to learn to get past those things and let it be, it is what it is at this point. And there were other people involved who picked up that slack, I should say, and helped me, experience some things outside of my neighborhood and things like that. So, whether we want our parents do it or somebody else takes time to do it, then I think, that's another way of having gratitude towards those who want to give you their time, and that's who I gravitated to. Those who wanted to be involved in my life and wanted to cheer me on and wanted to celebrate me when it was time to celebrate, or just, give me a good job and things like that. So those things meant a lot to me.
Gratitude is a base for your life, isn't it?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I mean, I feel like if you don't operate in gratitude, that there will be room for no more things to be grateful for, and then that means life is over, and you don't get to experience those great things that life has to offer if you're not, grateful for what is already being provided for you.
Absolutely. And for those that are wondering about the law of attraction, gratitude is calling out the positive, which attracts
Hmm.
more of it. So we'll
Hmm.
give that little mini lesson on this podcast episode also. I have a brother actually that we didn't know about until I was about 28. And so he
Hmm.
was adopted. And when you talk about broken promises and kind of these feelings of abandonment of who's supposed to be here and not here,
Hmm.
it could be across the board. I mean, I
It could be.
raised in a family, I mean, there was divorce, but I think a lesson as a parent is don't say something that you can't follow through on, no matter how big
Right,
or small.
right.
Um, that's a huge parenting lesson, no matter how you're parenting. But knowing that as we grow up, we do reconcile. And I've talked to my half brother actually about it because, I mean, I'll just say the Argo family is a very special and unique family, but the
Hmm.
idea of, seeing what could have been, and I asked him, I'm like, really? Like, do you have feelings that you wish? And I think sometimes the reality of the situation and understanding the system's not perfect, but there's a reason that foster care and adoption exists, right?
Hmm.
And it doesn't always work out the best, but the essence of it, and when it's done with fidelity, it allows extended family to fill in gaps.
Hmm.
Adults are doing the best that they can with what they have. I'm sure that you were able to come to a point to know that your parents loved you and they did the best they could with what they have when they had it. And that was a different era, right?
Right. It was the 90s. It was the 90s
Yeah.
and the early 2000s. And, I just accepted it, that who they were, the individuals that they were. They were kind of alike, but then they had their ways of doing and saying certain things. And I'm like, well, that's just who they are. And I just don't want to be them. And I'm not going to be them. I'm not going to portray myself to be, how some people are like, oh, you just like your mom, you just like it. No, I don't want that type of type
You
of
observe what not to do, and that helps you,
right. Yeah,
right? Which
I
is
already
another
see.
lesson, this turning into the law of attraction podcast, but
Mhm.
that's the other thing, right? When you make a choice and it doesn't work out, don't see it as a
Mhm.
mistake. You see it as information from the universe that that's not the
Mm.
direction to find what you're looking for.
Right, and they looking in from the outside, I learned a lot of lessons from them, and I saw a lot of the consequences of their actions. And I'm like, yeah, that's not the life that I want to be. Seems kind of stressful there, I don't want any parts of that. You've already given me some stressors of my own, just by being present and by bringing me here. As children, they don't ask to be here, they're just here, you made them. And that's another thing that we have to remember, when having kids, these kids in for these situations, they were born into them and now they got to make the best of it. And that's what I had to do too. You have to make the best of a situation that has really no, you have no control over until it's time for you to be in control, and that's during your, I guess, teenage years when it's time for you to make some decisions for yourself about who you are and where you're going, things like that. So, with that, I had to remember, this is my time now. This is my choice. This is the way I want to do things. So when I think back on how they did things when they were my age, or if I'm 36 now and I'm thinking about how they were doing things at 36, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to go that route. I want to be something more. I want to be something more, and I want to be, someone that can be, that people respect in a way that they'll be like, oh, Barry, he did this. He did this. Was the type of person he was, and everybody will be on the same accord of who I was of who I am, and that's the type of person that I really, really wanted to work on from my teenage years up until now. Like, this is who I want to be. And if I want to be this person. This is the things that I cannot do. These are the things that I will not do. These are the things I will not accept, as a person, as, building principles and morals for myself and sticking to them. And I think, not a lot of people that were teenagers were trying to develop principles and morals and sticking to them, but that's what I wanted to do at that age. I'm like, this is who you're going to be. This is who you are. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I never drink, I never smoke, things like that. Anything that I saw that kind of destroyed my parents is something I want to stay away from. And no matter who I was around, and they were like, "Oh, you want?" No, I don't want any of that. No, I can't do that. I don't do that. And whatever feedback I would get from that, like, you can say whatever you need to say. It's just not happening because I wanted to be secure in who I was as a person, and to know that I stayed away from all those things and it turned out better, because I feel if my parents would have stayed away from those things, then they would be better. They would be more successful. They would be more useful to others.
You and I are very reflective. It's that empathy part of us that I think uses reflection to try to figure out.
Hmm.
And it is a process. I
Hmm.
look back at my parents, and both of my parents have passed. And I have to tell you, I've had the best relationship with both of my parents since they've passed. Because as I get older, I understand and I think back to when they were my age and where they were and
Hmm.
what was going on in the circumstances. And like, I'm grateful that mental health care is much better than it was, in the 50s and 60s, and
Hmm.
realizing that the way our society is can dictate some of the influences of choices, right? And it's
Hmm.
allowed me to forgive, because I know I'm doing things and I know I'm doing the best that I can, but I promise my child is learning what not to do. But you're so focused on like doing what you didn't want to do from your parents, that you're making your
Hmm.
own set of mistakes. And so I think
Right.
it's one of the benefit of the generations. So there's forgiveness in that too.
Hmm.
Barry, my podcast, as you know, is about I like to use I'm really big on language, but I like to use the term only parent, because my narrative, it does extend, to being a parent, creating a family. But some of the vocabulary that's used as single mothers by choice, choice moms, for a lot of women that choose this pathway to create a family of their own, there's a lot of thinking about a barrier of having a family, that they're supposed to do it as a two-parent family or
Hmm.
a heterosexual family or this many kids or this. Do you think that you're growing up and seeing what you didn't want to be as a person, and when you wrote that down at 16 that you wanted to adopt, did you know then that it was going to be as an only parent, or was that something that kind of just developed because of the order that everything happened?
I think it developed. I knew I was going to do it, whether I had a partner or not. I was going to do this. This was going to be something I was going to do. And if I had to be a single parent to do it, then that was just what it was going to be. It wasn't on purpose to say, oh, but when the opportunity presented itself to be a parent in general, full time as an adoptive parent, then I just was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. I'm not in a relationship right now. I've been focusing on this kid, making sure this kid is going to be okay, and might as well. I'm going to stop now because I don't have someone else with me. I've been doing it myself this whole time, so I didn't want to, talk myself out of it because of that one reason. It was just something that so happened. It just happened, and I'm glad it happened that way.
Right, you didn't have that feeling that you had to wait for someone. But I guess
No.
there's a sense of the difference is, I think, for foster and someone like me who like went out and created a child, is that, like you just mentioned, the child was there and the
Mm,
child needed you.
right.
That's very good. I think it's a really intuitive one, and I hope it's one of the takeaways, is understanding that, I when I coach, I tell people you have to really dig down and get right with what you want. And sometimes there's
Hmm.
ways that influences it. And I know for me, it was this idea of I always knew I wanted to be a parent. I spent my teenage years babysitting for one family that had 3 girls, and they would
Mhm.
go off like, in high school, they went to Europe for 2 weeks, and I got 3 girls on the bus and got myself to school and came back, and it's like and so I guess it's this idea of get right with what you want, but also be really careful about not letting noise interfere and cluing in. I mean, we'll
Right.
get to like having an adult life because I think that's important. We'll get to that
Mm.
later. But don't ever underestimate, especially when you're talking about contributing to growing kids, because they're going to end up ruling the world when we need to be taken care of, right?
Mhm. Right. Right.
So what's the best part of being an only parent, Barry?
Well, I think the best and most important part is the buck stops with me. There's nobody to run to and try to manipulate people between each other and say, well, dad said, and nope, my no is the final no. And that's, my yes is the final yes, things like that. And, I think, and I did, the set of rules that I created were very simple. It wasn't really no laundry list of the do's and don'ts. It was more about character and being the person that you feel people will respect and things like that, and, clean up after yourself, things like that. Things like
Clean up
that.
after yourself. I can
Right.
only
So,
imagine. I have one boy in the house, and I can only
mhm.
imagine what it's like with 4 of you.
I would say no. People would think that it would be like craziness, but it's not. Everybody, I have my oldest son who's moved on. He's moved out for like 2 years now. But even him, he was like the neatest kid. He really didn't have stuff all over the place. My youngest is the same. He really doesn't have things all he's very organized. Like he keeps things together so he'll know where they are, type of thing. And my middle son, he's like me. He's kind of a mess, but it's like it's like he can get it together when he needs to and things like that. So, uh, you know, having a house full of boys, it wasn't that crazy zoo that people might imagine it to be, because there was sometimes that I remember the director from the agency came over once when I had my oldest son, and I had him plus my godsons in the house, and me and her were talking on the couch. And she was like, "So where are the kids?" And I was like, "Oh, they're in the back." And she was like, "They're so quiet." Like, "Yeah, they're probably watching a movie, playing a game or something." But I told them I don't like a lot of noise. So that's what they were saying.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so I'm like, and they were like 9 and 10 then. So that was, that she was like, "Wow, I just never been in a house full of kids and you don't hear the kids." I'm like, "Yeah, maybe
Wow.
go back there and see them if you want. They're back there playing." And so she was
Yeah, they're happy, they're healthy, they're safe.
right, they're there. They're not locked up in the closet or anything. They're there, they're playing, they're doing their thing. And I'm
Yeah,
out here. If there's an issue, I'll hear it or they'll come and tell me. So things
yeah,
like that. So
they know where to find you.
yeah,
Well,
they know what. There were times that I had about 8 or 9 boys over between my sons and my godsons, and then their sibling who needed somewhere to go while the mom's at work or whatever. So, even then, someone visited and they were like, "I thought there were kids here." I'm like, "Yeah, they're in the back somewhere. They're probably
they're
playing
in
a
the
game."
back.
Yeah, right. I'm listening to them. I don't know. I don't hear anything. They should be okay. So, I think it's the atmosphere that you create is what the kids will adapt to when they're in certain spaces. If it's chaotic, then everything's going to be chaotic. If it's everything is calm and the expectations are we don't need to be yelling at each other and screaming and running around the house, then that's the expectation, and that's what they're going to try to, you know, abide by, things like that. That's what I feel as a parent.
So when you came out of high school and you started working in childcare, one of the flip sides, you're solely responsible for raising these kids. You transitioned into another career and into broadcasting. How did that
Mhm.
go? And was it a leap of faith, or did it just another one that just kind of happened for you? And
It just kind of happened for me. I love media and I love what media can do for people. And, I put on Facebook, you got to write it down or do something to, put it out there. I put on Facebook, oh God, I should have became a radio personality or a news anchor, and had a few news anchor friends around town. And I knew a few people on radio around town. I was like, and they were like, oh yeah, you should definitely do that. You had personality for it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm gonna look around and see if it's meant to be, then that happened. And I found I had a meeting with a station here who was willing to give me some time on air to see if I could, work it out. And it worked out. It worked out from a once a week, 1 hour show to an everyday show across America in certain states. So, just speaking it and working at it and knowing the challenges of it, things like that, knowing all that up front helps me, press forward with it. So that's in the transition with the kids. I mean, I think my oldest son was just about graduating from high school when I was a year into it. And, my two younger ones, they're kind of self-sufficient. So, parenting can tends to, lower itself when they become more self-sufficient. So it's like, well, I have a little more time to do these things, and it's not like I'm doing anything crazy. So sometimes my youngest son could come with me to different things and enjoy himself and, go around and talk to different people with the kids, because we're more like a family community show type of thing. We're not in these crazy clubs or anything. We're like at community events and things like that. So it's like, it's family friendly for my kid. So I can take him with me. He can go to the photo shoots and jump in and out or do what he always needs to do, like be my little assistant type of person. Just like your son was helping us earlier.
No,
So, yeah.
I've had to have self-talk with myself when I get disappointed because he doesn't want to do something that what I want to do. And I'm like,
Mhm.
wait, Ann, he's not your best friend. He's your child. He's
Right.
not supposed to want to take the air conditioning unit apart and clean it for 5 days. So
Right.
acknowledge when you need an assistant and you're acting as a parent, and when you need a
Right.
friend and he doesn't want to be.
Right.
So I totally get it. So you were able to invest, but I also love it because there's nothing I'd love more than to be able to just do interviews and have conversations all the time.
Hmm.
But to be able to invest. And for me, one of the ideas of doing something else is my child is my life, and he's neurodiverse and he has needs, and you've done
Hmm.
something that is relevant, right? It's not like you have to leave your children and go do something else. It's incorporated, and it's
Hmm.
of it. And it sounds like you had a little bit more time to invest in building this transition. And it worked
Right.
out for you because, as you mentioned, you now have a nationally syndicated radio show, the Barry Farmer Morning Show.
Hmm.
And actually you are in Richmond, Virginia,
Yeah.
and you are once again in pursuit of the best in Richmond, right?
Yes, we are once again have been nominated as one of the best morning shows in Richmond, and I'm grateful and excited at the same time. Even if we don't win, it's just like where somebody recognized that we're here and we're trying to do our thing in the community, and this little young infant 4-year-old show is still trucking along here. And I think, I'm from here, so it means a lot. So yeah, you sit back and you watch certain things over the years and you're like, oh, I wish I could be a part of that. And now being a part of that, being in certain rooms with people that I've known for years and sitting there hearing them on the radio or seeing them on TV, and these are your friends now. You share people now to get work done and things like that. So I think it's really cool to still be at home, and now you're kind of a colleague of these people now, that these people that you used to admire in their field when you were too young, or you didn't have the experience, or you didn't have the opportunity to do what they do. And now you're sitting amongst them and you're having, a good laugh about certain things because now you're friends now.
Right. You worked your way into it. All right, Barry, I'm going to say it right now. I'm putting it out in the universe. I want some award for my podcast. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm not going to be picky as long as it's something good that's going
Something.
to go to the next level because
Yeah.
when I started it, it was the pandemic and I was like, okay, look, like once you have your kids and get them in school, you got to keep in this community, right? And that was,
Hmm.
and it's slow, right? But I had to get right. You do it because you love it, but it's also good
Hmm.
out in the universe because you need those carrots with all the different plates spinning, right? To remember, oh wait,
Right.
I got to do this. This is keeping me going.
Right.
And so you've gotten a lot of publicity for your story, bringing
Yeah.
into foster care and adoption, and your boys and your pictures are all over the place. People Magazine, the
Hmm.
Today Show, I could name all of them. How did they feel about all of this attention?
I don't think they feel anything, to be honest. They never really say anything about it. They just, someone might bring it up to them if they saw them on TV. They don't get recognized in public unless they're with me. And but because if they're by themselves, nobody's like, oh my God, that's you're the kid from TV or you're the kid from the newspaper or whatever. If we're together is when we mostly get recognized. But if we're apart, then I feel like everyone is safe, except for me. There are people that recognize me for a whole different thing, but for them, they're more safer by themselves and
Right.
not as a unit, of all four of us together type of thing, because we have been recognized out and about a few times as a unit. Someone even screamed at us from across the parking lot at the movies. And I was like, please don't scream at the
Yeah,
kids.
don't
Thank
scream at my kids.
you.
Hear 'em.
Right. And I think me and my youngest were in the bank one time. Someone was like, oh, hey, is that you, Barry Farmer? This is your kid. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Oh, this is your son. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
right.
good.
So,
We want to keep their anonymity, Barry, because
right. So
getting
I don't think
bigger.
they really, yeah, they don't, I usually do the interviews and everything. So they don't really speak on it. I don't really think they should. I don't tell their story. You know what I mean? So when they're ready to talk about it and they have the opportunity to do so, then I think they will do it. But it's not something that I'm forcing you to, hey, you need to go come and talk about this, or hey, let's do this TikTok or whatever. If they want to do it, then they are more than welcome to do it. There have been some opportunities like when we got flown out to LA, where you are with Disney. They had this show called this content place called Babel or whatever, and they flew us out for like 24 hours, 48 hours. You know how the media can be sometimes. And that was our first time flying together. We all wanted that experience. We could have said no because we're scared to fly, but it was like, yes, let's do this. How many times are we going to get to go to California together? And, they were just excited about it. And it was a great opportunity. They got to go to the boardwalk in Santa Monica, which is
Here.
where the video game, the Grand Theft Auto video game is based there or something. They were like, oh my God, we played it on the game. So just taking in all the sights and things like that I thought it was a great opportunity for us to share together. I was a nervous wreck because now I'm traveling across the country as a Black guy with these three white kids, and I dare someone to stop me because I'm about to be on the news for a whole nother reason. So it's
Well, it's funny. I didn't anticipate this question, but one of the things
Mhm.
in the different groups and that we talk about is the fact that, there's no father on the birth certificate, and a lot of women talking about going out of the country or to another state, and do they need proof
Mhm.
of it? And I love to travel. I dragged him to Australia when he was 5, and I put him on a plane for
Nice.
2 months when we moved to New Orleans. And I do have his passport, but I have really strong opinions, and I think that's part of the narrative too, that I don't think people need to make assumptions, right? And
Mhm.
but that being said, we all talk about what documentation and what borders and what airports that you might need to make sure you have your paperwork.
Right. Right.
Which
So when we did that travel, I took everything that I could think of with me just in case, because we've never, some of my other fellow transracial adoptive parents who are Black with white kids, we talk about it. And they shared their horror stories of just about being in the Target or being in the Walmart or being in an amusement park and people stopping them thinking that they took their kids, they stole their kidnappers and whatever. And I said, well, I have never experienced any of that. And I was like, well, wonder why I've never experienced any of this living in the good old state of Richmond, Virginia, the Confederacy's capital or whatever. And nobody's ever walked up on me, questioned me or anything. And I asked my aunt, she was like, to be honest with you, you're not the most approachable person in public when you sometimes. And I was like, really? She's like, no, you got this look about you that says, don't talk to me, don't touch me. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, I probably do carry that on my face because I'm concentrating and I'm being vigilant. So they were like, because I have kids here and I need to make sure all of them come home, type of
Yeah,
thing.
when
But
you're
yeah,
a woman, they call it the resting bitch face, but when you're a man, I
right.
call it concentrating. I tell people,
Right.
"Are you mad?" And I'm like, "No, I think I'm thinking."
Right.
But
I
I
am
agree with
thinking.
you. It's also that embodiment, right? It's how you carry
Hmm.
yourself. And I'm not a teeny tiny person, but
Right.
it is interesting what catches someone's eye, and it's those
Right.
micro actions and people's perception. And I'm sure that you have really strong thoughts about how many white parents of Black adoptive or other race adoptive children have that run in, right? Like the disparity between who's the parent, what color is the parent, and what color is the
Hmm.
child.
Well, when I adopted my oldest son, I didn't see anybody look like us for an extremely long time. I didn't realize it was as rare as it was for number one Black people to be adopting, period, and then Black people to be adopting outside of their race. So when I really got into social media, because I really wasn't into social media for a while, but when I really dug deep and then the whole media storm every year or twice or three times a year of these articles and whatnot, because it's so rare, um, I found people who were like me. And I was like, oh, there are others. And it turned out, even here in Richmond, there was the director of an agency that I had transferred to. She had adopted a white girl, and I was like, oh, well, and here we are. There's more. Okay, so I'm not alone in this. It's not unheard of, which is great. But I could be a voice in this to say, hey guys, this is probably what we should be doing, and this is probably what you should not be doing, and things like that. But, you know, finding others who can relate is always great. It's always, refreshing to connect with them. And I feel like I've connected with every one of them who's been in the media because I feel, you know, I haven't seen them before me. They weren't around before me. And there were others before me, but it wasn't as, social media wasn't as powerful as it is now. So those who came after, I try to connect with them, to, let them know that you're not alone in this, and they're great people, and I love all of them. They're just amazing. They're funny. They're understanding. They get it. And it's always good to be around people that get it and can understand that. And I couldn't relate to them up with the whole, being accused of kidnapping thing. And I was very surprised. And then each one of them had their own stories about it. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy because I wouldn't have acted well at all. They told them how they were, calm during the situation. I said that wouldn't have been me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
It wouldn't
calm
have been my
either.
kids.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
kids would have went crazy on people. So I'm glad I'm able to connect with them, and that it's we're trying to make it kind of I don't want to say normal, but let people know that this flip side of it exists, and it is common, but you really don't have to wait to see it on the news in order to find people that look like us. There's a communities around where if you just pay attention without being too nosy, that you'll see that this is not as uncommon as you might think it is. And it's been happening for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. Awareness and exposure. And I think there's an
Hmm.
education part to this, right? And that's part of the define the narrative. I think it's really important for everyone to realize that you don't have to counter a tradition or a should or a must. But
Hmm.
at the same time, as humans and trying to assimilate information, we tend to group things and label them. And so I do understand people try to make sense of something. And I also understand, depending on where you live and the kind of life you live. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know that I didn't know anybody. I know I went somewhere that I didn't know anybody, and that's one of the things that I hope with this podcast as well, is to build it, because it is the village, right? And the good
Mm-hmm.
thing about social media and airplanes is that it we don't have to walk there. And so
Mm-hmm.
for that, I think it's really good that you keep telling that story. And it's the normalization for those that feel like it's not normal. And just acknowledging a lot of people have a very narrow experience, and it's not that they're against it. I mean, I live in Los Angeles. It's a very diverse in all different ways. I think it's one of
Mm-hmm.
the good things for me about being an only parent is like I I'm just another one, right? And you did mention, about Richmond and people seeing you and acknowledging you. And I just want to give a shout out, coming from a Southern traditional Confederate state as well. I was ready to face whatever came. And I have never to this day encountered anyone that has said anything negative about my choice. In fact, I have
Mm-hmm.
found a lot of women and men who have said, I wish I could have. So, it's always amazing when we're bold and we share and we're willing to be honest about something, that how many people are having the same thoughts or doing the same thing. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's great. And when we talk about this whole race conversation, and you and I, when we talked, I was like, okay, Barry, look, I'm not the normal person. I like to talk about it. I'm not afraid for someone to put me in my place. But
Mm-hmm.
coming from Birmingham, Alabama, in the 70s and 80s, it's very black and white. And I don't remember exactly the situation, but I think it has to do with a lot of the work I do is in equity and diversity and language. And we were doing an activity, and it made me really think, like, okay, and like I remember riding the school bus, and I had friends that were black, and I had friends that lived near me. And for me, the like I lived on a street where there was another white family that literally lived in a converted school bus. And, like there were, I think similar to you, it's like there's things that you see that aren't right, but then there's also things that you don't see that I thought was really marvelous for me. But I
Mm-hmm.
decided to go back to my yearbook and go, okay, you think there's what, 40% that were black. And I counted in my class, and it was, what do you think?
I'm gonna say above 10.
There were, is about 8%. So I think it was like 13 for a little
Okay.
over 100 kids in the class. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that I was so surprised. They say as a kid, you remember things bigger and
Yeah.
it's skewed. But I remember being friends with black kids too. Like I don't, and I mean, look, racism is in my family, don't get me wrong, but I also
Mm-hmm.
remember seeing it for what it was and remember like not caring, right? Like my friends are my
Mm-hmm.
friends. But it was very interesting because it made me as an adult and an educator realize that I was a huge majority, and I didn't perceive
Mm-hmm.
that huge majority. And you, as a black parent and white kids, did something to, because you had something similar with your kids. So I'll start with, what was the racial makeup when you were growing up going to school? And then tell us what happened when you realized that your son was a huge minority in his school.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, I would say we had about 99% blacks, and there was always like a white kid maybe trickled in there somewhere, maybe too if they had a sibling or something. And we kind of were living in the same district as what I went to school. And once he came home one day, he said something, and I was like, "What?" And I went to school. I went to school to see him because I would like eat lunch with the kids or whatever, at least once or twice. a year maybe if I had time during that time. And I went to see him at school and his classroom, and I saw him sitting there, and I said, "Holy smokes!" I was like, we need to move because I need you to be around people who look like you. I mean, it's great. I want to have a more diverse area for him where he can see Black people, white people, Muslims, and in all types of cultures, and not just one particular culture, but to have the opportunity to interact with people who look like him, because I do feel that to a degree, white people do have a culture. They have a certain way of doing things. They have a certain way of talking and things like that. And he talked that way. He looked that way. He was used to being around white people. So you go from one extreme to another. When you go somewhere that's probably only white and to somewhere that's only Black. And I'm like, well, I need some diversity for him because he's a sweet kid. He loves everybody, but I want him to be exposed to everybody and not just one sided. So we did end up moving to suburbs where it was more diverse. We was in a neighborhood where there was a lot of diversity. We had Koreans, we had Indians, Arabics, Muslims, white people, Black people. It was just really cool. It was like a really diverse community. So, and the school was as well. So I was like, okay, this is better than than where we were because I kind of wish sometimes that I went to school with different ethnicities as well. Because even if we did have like a Muslim girl or something, I would ask questions like, "So what is that on your head? What does that mean? What can you do? What can't you do? Type of thing."
How many
I would
times
want.
did it land with them being offended? Because I'm the same way, and sometimes it just doesn't land that way.
Well, I think because we kind of looked alike, with the color and everything, wasn't wasn't that offensive.
So
And we're
pick the
kids,
people you ask find a safe person to ask
right?
questions.
Yeah, find a safe person to ask it. We had that was even I think we had even a Korean or two that went to like middle school with us, and how everybody would ask them how to say certain things, and because they were in ESL, so they were doing dual languages, and people asked them how to say certain things in their language, from American language and things like that. And kids are curious; they want to learn different things. And even if we were in the hood and we saw someone that was not, from around, we're like, oh snap, let's ask some questions, and let's see what we can learn because it's not going to be available to us here, obviously in the lower in the on the poverty level. That's what we were going to school at. So having that curiosity, when that's what I always had when I would see people from like there was even some deaf kids in our class, and I would ask them, like, how do I say my name in sign language? And then we had a blind girl who could really sing, and she would read the braille, and I didn't ask questions about the braille because I was like, this is not going to work. But anybody that was, I felt that was unique in a way. I had questions, and I wanted to know, what it was like to be them, type of thing.
I think that's a great approach. And I think that's kind of what again, always grappling with ideas and trying to understand. It's the curiosity. And I think
Hmm.
that curiosity to understand is really important. And you hit on a really big topic that it's bigger than this conversation, but it is the idea of culture and deep culture. And one of my favorite people that has done a lot of research and work in this is Dr. Shiraki Holly. And it's the idea of this iceberg, right? So race
Hmm.
is just part of culture. It is not everything, but race is part of a culture, but it's not just that. And when you mentioned where your son was coming from, your son lived with a family that had a bunch of different things. And so it's not just the things above the water on the iceberg. Culture is so deep, and sometimes not even things that you can call out. They're so discreet, right? It's not just language,
Hmm.
space, or food, or um you know taking your shoes off when you come in the house, or anything like that. So I think curiosity is really a good way to look at it. But he has a saying, it's VAB, it's validate and affirm students from
Mhm.
the language and culture. And I think that's something that we all need. We all, even as being only parent, we need to validate each other and affirm each other in whatever it is and who we are and how we are as humans.
Mhm.
And then it goes on to build and bridge in the educational setting. But I think too, in what we're doing, it's let's build and bridge society, to understand and not be afraid and understand nobody's trying to control the world. Um, so, but I think it's really huge, and I think it's really amazing that you're able to say that, because I think in the race conversation, there's a lot. I know a lot of white people that are afraid to be in the conversation. And
Mhm.
I know that there's some people who feel that white people don't belong in the conversation, but I will just say it and want to thank you for being open to having that conversation. It is
Mhm.
curiosity, and education is the way forward for anything. And no matter what, people need to learn and understand something that they don't see.
Right.
Think they should see it or not. So
Mhm.
for that, thank you. And I do think it's important that you're with people that understand. I know things have landed in the wrong way because sometimes the way I say it isn't the way I meant it. But people
Mhm.
that really know me, they know that it's out of a curiosity. I mean, I moved across the country for diversity. So thank
Mm.
you for that. And you are very vocal, actually, when you talk about fostering and adopting transracial,
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
both directions. And you
Mhm.
actually made a 4th of July comment on Instagram that I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if you remember it or if you'd be willing to share it. Do you remember it? It was about 4th of July and all the celebrations, and
Oh, well, that
question for the
wasn't,
white parents. Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't my comment. I reshared it from one of my fellow transracial adopted parents who was Black, who was adopted white kids. And she said, I hope you put the same energy into celebrating Juneteenth as you did July the 4th. And I was like, you're right, my friend, because did you? You know, you can light your fireworks on that day as well. But
Absolutely.
so yeah, she did her is fostering while Black fam on Instagram. She did. We both of us tend to put things out there that, you know, make you think. A lot of us do. I think all of us do in that circle that, you know, when it comes to Black people who have adopted white kids, we do put those questions out there like, you know, hope you are doing XYZ. And there was this one I was on for a while with the hair care and the skin moisturizing because there was another patient I was familiar with who was a real big advocate of white adopted parents who need to do proper hair care and skin treatment to their Black kids, you know. And I was like, that is a problem because I'm tired of seeing ashy Black kids in white families with no hairline when they're supposed to have a haircut. Or they have little Black girls who have like really low cuts because their hair is not being properly taken care of. So it's not really a low cut, it's matted because you're out using proper hair care regimens to help them grow, you know, healthy hair.
They don't
So
even
I
take them to someone who knows how to cut black hair, right? Or
Right,
sew black hair.
exactly. Yeah, you put them in spaces, you isolate them in these communities where there's no one that looks like them, no one that can help you care for them when it comes to their skin care, their hair care, their culture. And then you will get offended online when someone questions it, like what, and they're looking like, what is going on with that baby's hair? And why are her knees so ashy? Where's the lotion? Where's the moisturizer? Where's the cocoa butter? You know, where's the oil? So, you know, and then people get offended, or you letting them walk outside with bonnets. And you're like, why are you because there's a stereotype of when Black women walk outside with bonnets that they are lazy, but when a white woman walks around with a messy bun, they're just tired and they're, you know, oh my God, they're overwhelmed as a mother. So they can do that, but we can't have young ladies that are Black walking out with bonnets because that perpetuates a stereotype that they are lazy type of thing. So why aren't you doing their hair? Why would you let them walk around like that type of thing? They don't have that same privilege as you do. to have a messy bun and have a messy bun with a mug and be tired. And the bonnet symbolizes at times that they are lazy, which doesn't have to be that way, but that's just the stereotype of it all. I don't see anything wrong with a bonnet going outside, do what you do. You don't want stuff to get in your hair, because I wear like a scarf on my hair because I don't want the pollen and everything getting into it, or there may be dust, or just be hot,
You don't just run home every day after school, like I tell my son, and just wash your hair, right?
Right. You
It's
don't,
not like
yeah.
you
So
just wash your hair every day
right, and shake it and it be dry, it's
because
just
that is exactly what he has to do. And I
right.
think that that's a good point. I think sometimes
Mhm.
a little shocking comment like that is
Mhm.
because I think too, even for myself, sometimes we don't even recognize what is our own culture. And I think there's a fine
Mhm.
too of, making sure you're calling stuff out, but then not overdoing it so that there's not an invitation to be curious. But I
Mhm.
think it's nice that it's all of that, because we don't have to go into a conversation about taking care of Black people's hair, why you're ashy if you don't have cocoa butter, but it's different, and be curious, and there is diversity, and
Right.
but again, don't forget that, I mean, even people who have biracial children, it's like you
Mhm.
have to know the race and all of the different parts
Mhm.
that are coming with what you have, and take care of them. So
Right. So
so
that part of it, I do post things like that on my Instagram or whatever, and just to get the conversation started, or to get it, make sure it stays fresh. Like, hey, you need to
don't
get.
forget
Have you moisturized your child today? Have you,
your PSA for your
right? Have you found a great barber for your child today? So and the kind of sometimes, when I'm in the Explorer on Instagram, and it shows you all these great pictures of these families, and sometimes it'll pop up in mind of the white family who's adopted the Black kids, and I'm looking at them. I'm already, like, did you do it? Did you did you moisturize that baby before you started to take these professional pictures? So and it kind of pisses me off sometimes. Like, why am I can be responsible for my kids and making sure that I take them to the supercuts and make sure they come out with a great haircut. But you won't go to Leroy or somewhere 10 miles away to make sure your child has a decent haircut, or to make sure they have, proper skincare and things like that. Now, I'm not going to say I haven't given my son sunburn or anything, because I have. We've forgotten the sunblock a few times. But
that's
it was a lesson learned.
grew up and we didn't wear sunblock, Barry. Sunblock's just the newest thing. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not. The ozone's different than it used to be, but that's not because you're forgetting who they are.
Right,
If you need a resource page, Barry, this is your product placement opportunity. To maybe some folks need some ideas.
right. You know what? You're right. You're right. But I think my other friends, they have those pages as well, and I'm sure all people who follow them follow me at times as well, and they have those proper things that they can, make sure they're taking care of their kids the right way, type of thing.
So do your research when you're fostering and
Hmm.
adopting, and
Yes.
ask, because there's people out there doing it no matter what race it
Right.
is.
Right.
So Barry, as an only parent, I've had my stages and phases of wanting to date or be more social, and sometimes the phase or stage that my son is at is too demanding.
Mm.
Sometimes it's hard for me to do that multitasking. And other times I am happily finding him some sleepovers.
Hmm.
Uh, do you enjoy the adult life, Barry? Can you relate to those stages and phases? And I know for me, I've
I
struggled
don't
because I
know.
moved away from family, but I need friends.
Uh,
What are your go-tos?
Oh, my go-to is my aunt. She watches. My sons, they have a godmother who pitches in when it's time for me to go somewhere, or go if I want to go out or anything like that. So, I have a good support system. All I have to do is ask, when I'm ready. And, they're old enough now that they can still about itself. But when they were younger, I had my aunt. I could drop them off. Like, I'll be back in a few hours. Things like that. So yeah, I think, whenever I'm ready to get out there, I have the privilege of of going when I want.
Yeah. No. I agree with you. Agree with you. So there's an important person that you share the microphone with on your show, and
Hmm.
that's Sharon Lizzie.
Yeah, Sharon.
And do you consider her your partner in crime, your work wife?
Oh, she's definitely my partner in crime. Sharon has been such a trooper through all of this. She came on about a month and a half after the show launched because I was on air by myself and I hated that. So she was kind of that voice I needed to, bounce things off, and we are kind of like my on-air antagonizer, going back and forth and things like that, or just laughing uncontrollably, things like that. But she has been such a huge, huge part of the growth of this show, along with her and my other co-hosts who are here now, with Donna, producer, who was my mentee, growing up. He was like my little guy. Now he's like a grown man. He's a part of the show. And we have Dee Marie, who is our entertainment person. She reports on all the good things that are going on in the entertainment business and things like that. And we have two new voices on the show, Jamaican Lion and your favorite Ashley. And because she's your favorite Ashley because there are a ton of Ashley, so she wants to be your favorite.
Which Ashley is your favorite, Ashley?
Yeah, your favorite Ashley. And they're just great people. Everybody just has like this sense of community, and they want everyone to win, and they are just great people. And it's great to have people who are hungry at your table, who are hungry for success, and who are talented, and who they complement me, and we complement each other. That deal. But Sharon has been like a great co-host for the show, and even when I went down with my health issue last year, Sharon was on top of it. She had to convince me to let her help, and I was like, no, Sharon, you don't need. We need to do something, Barry. Okay, we'll do it. I'm gonna be at home. She's just been a great friend as well. Just not only a co-host, but a great friend.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. She really watches out for you. And I know we all need people to watch out for us, but especially as an
Hmm.
you had a health scare last year.
Hmm.
She started a GoFundMe,
Yes.
diagnosis of congestive heart failure
Hmm.
at a young age, right?
Young, yeah.
So Barry, I don't wanna poke a bear, but I will tell you, I've lost both of my parents, and they were
Hmm.
70. My mom turned 71 right before she passed.
Hmm.
And my sister and I and my brother have talked a lot about the lessons. And as an only parent, especially when you sign up for this, there's some things that you think of, and there's three things that we've really kind of come away with: is make sure that you have all your paperwork and finances in order, make
Hmm.
sure that you enjoy every minute because you did want this, and make sure that you do everything you can to stay alive as long as you and
Right.
healthy while you're doing it. So
Right.
it's the hardest one for me. And I know at 50, I realize I need to be working harder now for when I'm 70. And,
Hmm.
my job gets in the way, but
Hmm.
what is that like for you? Is it hard? And then we deal with our own like genetic heredity that, like
Hmm.
I used to be way bigger than this Barry. So how is that, and how do you balance that, knowing that you've got all these balls in the air and you're the one that needs to stay healthy for these boys?
Well, one thing I learned about from my grandmother Cora is death will happen whether you want it or not. And these people that care for us and take care of us, they're not going to be around forever, and we have to make sure that we are doing what we are supposed to do to take care of ourselves. We can't always rely on these people who have helped us and nurtured us to be around to be that leaning shoulder and to be strong for us and things like that. And I think that's more so what I've been given to my sons as well. Is I'm not going to be around forever. I could go tonight, but your life will go on, and you will have to pick up the pieces and just go ahead and live your life. So, tomorrow's not promised to anyone. That's what my grandma used to say all the time. So, with that, I just, we take it day by day. And I'm not going to be worried about my boys because my boys have their own lives to live. They got their own mistakes to make. They have their own trials and tribulations that are going to be ahead of them that they got to learn to deal with on their own. Outside of me, they can't run to me forever. I cannot be their life's fire extinguisher to, put out everything. Some things they're going to have to face on their own without me, whether it's by choice or by force, and that's, what I take away from that because I learned that from my grandmother. When I saw my grandmother laying there lifeless with no more life in her, I was like, well, I was the last person to see her. And I looked at her and I was like, well, she told me this was going to happen. I'm well on my own. I'm like 24 at that point. I have a kid. So, those moments are the moments that we don't want to see, but they will happen. And I have to let my boys know the same thing. Like, there will be a day you cannot call me anymore. You won't be able to visit me anymore. And you have to be okay with that. You have to go live your life. Your life does not stop because mine did. You have to keep living. You're in the land of the living, so you keep living. And I will be in whatever land is after this. And and you have to be okay with it. You have to accept that. And I've experienced death so much. I planned my father's funeral at 19. So it was someone I wasn't particularly close to. But I did that, because it was part of one of the only things I could do for him to say that, you might not have been the best, but I can at least do this. I don't want to be like, no, I don't want to do it because you didn't do this and you didn't do that. Someone needed to do it. And it just so happened to be me at 19. So seeing him laying there, knowing that whatever did not happen is never going to happen now, then I'm going to have to be okay with that. And this gesture is to say that whatever didn't happen was not going to happen, and I'm okay with that. And this is the last thing that I can do for you. So, that part of it of me, doing things because I have the boys. I really have to do this for me because I've been taking care of these boys my entire adult life. So, in order for me to see things through for what I'm doing right now, I have to do it for me because I have lived for these boys. I've done my whole life has revolved around them for like 13 years. So it's starting to be my time, and I'm okay with my time because I'm more of an adult now than I even was when I adopted them, and I'm more of a man now than I was when I adopted them. I was someone who was young but mature at the same time. But for me, at this point, it is about me. It has to be about me because I did give. What if I gave the best years of my life to these kids? I gave the best years of my life to these kids, but I enjoyed those years with them being so young and watching them, learn different things and achieve different things that meant something to them. And now it's my turn to achieve a few more things. And even if I go tonight, then I'm happy with how things have went in life because I did it by choice and I did it the way I wanted to do things. And who doesn't want to live a life that they can do what they want, when they want, how they want to do it? So, and that's the life I want my sons to live, to create a life where you can do what you want when you want to do it, and it doesn't affect anybody. Don't do things that affect people. Do things that are great for you and great for others. So, this part of the life is for me. This heart thing is for me. It's for me to see things that I'm starting through, and even if I go and I have I leave a 13-year-old behind who won't experience me anymore in life, I think during the pandemic I spent enough time with him to the point that it will create 20 years ahead of time of the time we would have spent together. Because it came to a point that he was like literally in my room every day, all day. And I was like, man, I didn't realize how much you could talk.
You go back to the back of the house. Go back to you were good in the back of the
Right.
house, right? You're good at the back.
Right, but it did give me a lot more time to spend with him. So, even if something does happen to me, I want my boys to keep living. I think that's a lot of thing with grief when people are so grief stricken about people who have passed on that they forget to live themselves. And I had this talk with Sharon on air because we were talking about grief or whatnot, and she was talking about her mom, how she gets sad in this time of the year or whatever. And I said, well, Sharon, that is very, I think I told her she was selfish or something. So she was selfish or something. I said, now this is your mother was sick and she was kind of suffering, and we're going to get sad every day of the year when she found her peace. And she's like, like, why are we sad every year when someone was suffering? That the day that they gain their peace brings you sadness. That's not the way that should work. When I saw my grandmother laying there in the funeral home, and I knew she had been suffering with stomach cancer, and I was not I was particularly sad that I won't get to talk to her anymore. But as the days went on, I'm like, but she has lived a life of some turmoil in between and things like that. And she gained her peace that day when she passed away. And I'm happy for her for that, because she did tell me with her own words, I'm ready to go. Don't do anything to me. And I'm like, that's a peace that you want, and I hope you get, type of thing. And I think with me, even something happens to me, there's a peace that comes with that. And I want my sons to live until they find their peace as well. So I want them to keep living and exploring and whatever else that brings them happiness afterwards. Just, be okay with my peace. Don't get sad about my peace. I got peace. Peace is supposed to be happy.
So you hit on so many things. I think death changes us all, and grief is a hard thing. I think conceptualizing our incarnation and the energy that is in us. I think for my mother, it surprised me. It kind of came out of the blue, and I agree with you. Like
Right.
it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But I know, one of the things that I focus on is, be grateful, again, back to the gratitude of what was, instead
Mhm.
of lamenting about what could have been. And I do know, though, that, what I saw, what really brought her joy in life, and it was watching her kids and her grandkids play, and it was
Mhm.
the flowers and the plants, which is a love that she gave to me. I
Mhm.
think for me, that's what kind of, it's like, you're right, Barry. I want to stay alive for me. I want to be able to watch my child. Like, I've worked really hard for this, and I want to see the fruits of my labor. And I already have some
Mhm.
about grandkids, and he's only 11. But I also, like, you think you could have 3 of them by the time you're 20? Like, I did the math too. And the other thing too is that I'm the opposite of you, because
Mhm.
if I'm my parents' age when I pass, my child's going to be 30. So I think
Right.
for me too, it's like I'm dealing with a little more of a spread, but the strategy is still there. But you mentioned something else that I think is really important, because I was very angry at my father. I dragged my son to a different country to go take care of everything.
Mhm.
And the how he could have lived his life differently. But what I
Mhm.
know and I learned is everyone has a right to live their life the way they want to. And it
Mhm.
allowed me to stop hassling people to try to tell them how to be healthier or do things differently or be smarter or be wiser. I
Mhm.
mean, you can always try because you care about people, but in the end, it's like, it is your life to live.
Mhm.
And so it's hard. And death changes you, but the death of your parents, no matter what your relationship, it
Mhm.
will never be the same. But also
Mhm.
being a parent, you'll never be the same. So it's the circle of life, Barry.
Right.
Barry, how's your health today? And we'll make sure that everyone, if they want to contribute, can contribute. But how are you doing?
Well, I will have to have some surgery done on my heart to help it keep ticking. I will need a defibrillator because it's not going to get any stronger. So that's where I'm at with the whole heart thing. I'm still in the same position I was a year ago, basically. So we're not getting better, but we're just going to do some preventative things so we can stay alive a little longer, because that's what the doctor said. You either get it or you die. And I'm like, well, okay. So it's like,
Get it,
that's what
Barry. I know people that have lived with congestive heart failure
yeah.
for many, many years. So, and you
Mm,
already, you don't smoke and you don't drink. So
no,
you're on the right path.
right.
I'll up you one with being a vegetarian. So if you want to cross over, you're like,
No.
Barry, before we close, I can't tell you. I feel like I've known you forever. I don't know what it is, but it's been one of the best conversations that I've ever had. And thank you for coming over into what a lot of people feel very particular about being just a conversation for women. One thing I know is that a lot of men are jealous about women who have done what I've done because they can't quite do this. It's a little bit easier for women. You have to have a surrogate.
Mm,
And I
right.
foster care for me, as someone who has a brother who adoption is a very important part of his life.
Hmm.
For foster care and adoption, I'm wondering, what would you say to people out there? And then I'm just wondering, what do you think the common language between our lives and our pathways is, as we're only parents and raising kids and different races? Like what kind of resonates with you?
But when it comes to being a single parent, people kind of see it as like some type of handicap type of thing. But traditionally, from a father's standpoint, a father was just there to provide the house, the home, and the shelter and things like that. And the mother was the nurturer, and she was, the sweet talker, tuck you in, things like that. So when you have single parents doing these, both roles of being providers and then the nurturers and things like that, I don't think there's any difference between a married couple and a single person. I think a single person is just as capable of raising a child as a couple is. I mean, you can have a two-parent home and still come out all messed up, just as you will with a with a single. So there's a 50-50 in everything.
There's research to prove it.
Yes.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, right? Because
Hmm.
this idea that you need two different people, two different
Hmm.
people to do the different roles and meet the different needs. But as long as the needs are met, they're there, and as
Right.
you have the
And that's
ability.
the thing. The needs are being met. Not even if it's a single parent, but if it's like a mentor, or if it's like a cousin or some type of figure in your life, there's just a need that needs to be met. There are kids with no parents at all. There are kids that have no connection to any adult in certain countries. They're just orphans at that point. But there's somebody, hopefully, there that is providing that nurturing factor, because people need to be, they need some type of affection to help normalize certain situations for them. And maybe they don't have the traditional setting. And I think there's a lot of people pointing to like that traditional setting. That setting doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't guarantee you that you won't abuse drugs. It doesn't guarantee you that you won't get abused. It doesn't guarantee you that you will have the best life ever. Not even wealth guarantees you stability emotionally in any shape or form. So, it's just about, being around people who are nurturing you and giving you that affection and building you up in a way that's unique, because everybody needs, are different. So, status doesn't guarantee you anything. That's what I believe, that, you know, having two-parent home doesn't prevent anything. Having a single parent home doesn't prevent anything. Having money doesn't prevent anything, no matter what your class. Even being poor doesn't prevent anything. So, it's just about choices and, who figuring out who you want to be and how you want to get there, and, who you need to connect to in order to make things happen in life. I think that is what helps people be successful. It's not necessarily a two-parent home. It's not, not necessarily you won't have a great relationship because your parents were married. Oh, I want a marriage like my parents. Well, your parents, you didn't see everything that your parents went through. So, trying to create something that from what you see from the outside looking in will not guarantee happiness. Happiness is guaranteed by the choices that we make and the people that we have around us.
And I think finding out what that is, right?
Mhm.
Digging deep and being honest. And if
Right,
you have outrageous love to parent
right.
children, there's
Mhm.
nothing stopping you.
It's also a subjective thing. It's like one of the five systems. All of those things are subjective. It's not anything that says, "Oh, it's right or wrong." It's subjective. Happiness is what you perceive it to be. Success is what you perceive it to be. It's not your level of success that you feel is for you might not be someone else's level. They might want more. They might want less in order to feel successful. So it's a subjective thing. Happiness is subjective to what brings you joy. If a simple house on a block with a picket fence is something that will bring you joy and make you feel successful, then that's the life for you. If a mansion in the hills of LA is something that makes you feel successful, then that's your happiness for you.
Right. And just because you were raised a certain way doesn't mean that you have to continue living that way.
Yeah, right.
And so if you want to be a parent, put it in the universe and just
Hmm.
know that it will happen, because there's all
Hmm.
kinds of ways to get there. And there's people encouraging you, and there's a lot of children who need some outrageous love, and
Hmm.
villages and communities. Barry Farmer, you are a light in the world, and I want to thank you for it. I wish you all of the successes you continue with your radio show. I believe in modern and Eastern medicine, so I wish you continued improvement, and that you get what
Hmm.
you need so that you can enjoy life. You've given so much
Yes.
life. Life has a lot to give to you. And we'll see where this road goes, and maybe one day we'll come back and check in when you're an empty nester.
Yes. Do that.
All right, Barry Farmer, thank you so much for joining us on Define the Narrative podcast, and we look forward to listening to you on your radio show.
Thank you.
All right, take care.